Everyone. We're back with Stephen MacKenziey. It's Tracy coming to you live from New Hampshire Writers Project headquarters and back talking with you about our author holiday showcase for our members. I am excited, as I mentioned, to have Stephen MacKenziey with me here today. He is another of our featured members in the holiday showcase on our website at nhwritersproject.org. And today you're going to learn a little bit about his journey and his book. So, Stephen, I am very excited to have you with me here today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So before we jump into it, let's learn a little bit more about you and your career, and then we'll talk about your great book.
Well, my career in terms of what spawned writing was I was an English teacher at Somersworth High School for 25 years, or parts of 25 years, and just sort of developed a love for literature, and from that a love for writing. And this is my third book, and it's been a labor of love. This one has been particularly special to me.
Well, I'm very interested to learn more about it because you and I were chatting, before we went live here, and I was learning more about it. So this just sounds like a very interesting story, such a pivotal moment in history, and I'm really anxious to get into it with you and learn more about it. So I know your book is The Hattie Cotton School, the last teacher's firsthand experience of the 1957 bombing and aftermath, who happens to be your wife. That's which correct. I did not know that before. So, tell us a little bit about the book and how your wife's involved. And, let's learn a little bit more about the inspiration for the story.
Well, sometime, oh gosh, years and years and years ago, we've been married for 47 years. So sometime fairly early in our marriage, I remember, the first time might have even been before we were married. I remember Mary Ann mentioning her school being blown up. And so that, spawned a lot of questions. And she told me this story about her principal. And really, initially I thought the book was going to be about her principal. In fact, I thought there was even going to be titled Margaret Kate or Miss Kate. But it was the year 1957-1958 school year, and it was the year that desegregation, if you can imagine that, came to the Nashville public schools. And Mary Ann had a really bad first year as a first-year teacher the year before. And so this was a new year, and it was the first year at the Hattie Cotton School, and it was supposed to be a really good bounce-back year for her. But desegregation was causing a lot of disturbance in Nashville and throughout the South. It wasn't just unique to Nashville. But the Hattie Cotton School was fairly new. It was in a neighborhood where there had not been much in the way of Black students pre-registering. And some of the other schools had already been protested on the pre-registration day, but no one had pre-registered at Hattie Cotton, so they weren't really expecting anything. And then, lo and behold, that night, one little 6-year-old girl registered on the opening day of school. I think it was September 9th. Might have been September 10th, 1957. Our mom brought her in and registered her. And first, they were integrating one grade at a time for the next 7 or 8 years until they got fully integrated. And so they had this one little girl, 6 years old. Her name was Patricia Watson. And she attended school that day, no issues. And then that night, about midnight, a little after midnight, 12:33 or 12:35, all of a sudden, 100 sticks of dynamite blew out one wing of the school. And in some ways, Hattie Cotton was never the same. In some ways, the community was never the same. It took a toll on everybody. And the book really is, the first part of the book is the lead up to the opening day of school and all the preparations the school department was making, the school committee, the politicians at the time, and weighing everything that was coming out of Arkansas and Georgia and other places in the South. And then the second part of the book is really about the explosion and the immediate aftermath. And then the last part of the book is sort of the rest of the school year. And Mary Ann was determined that she was going to try to provide her kids as normal an education as she possibly could. But there was always that cloud hanging over it because the kids didn't understand. They didn't understand why they didn't understand about integration. They didn't understand why anybody would want to blow up their school. They didn't understand why their parents were being investigated as potential, either witnesses or participants in the bombing. And they had to relocate to. It actually ended up being an band instrument closet, storage room rather, in East High School. Which was about maybe a mile or so from the Hattie Cotton School. And that's where they spent the next, I think, 3 or 4 months. It was just hastily rearranged into a couple of classrooms, and Marianne and her buddy teacher, the other 6th grade teacher, spent several months there trying to provide some kind of normal education. But when I was talking about Margaret Kate before, she was the principal, and the thing that really struck me about her, and really was one of the first things that got me interested in the whole story, was just her bravery. I mean, the little girl had not been picked up after her half day of school, and nobody quite knew why. Well, come to find out, the mother had found out what was going on at the school, and she was afraid. She was afraid for her daughter. She was afraid for herself. So she called a taxi cab. But by then, word had gotten out that there was a black child at Hattie Cotton, and one black child out of, I think, 323 other students or something like that. The taxi driver came and was surrounded by protesters, and the cab was rocked back and forth, and the man was afraid, and so he backed up and left. Which left Patricia waiting for her mom, who never showed up. And finally, Margaret realized what was going on and brought her into the office, and they tried to figure out what to do. And nobody knew what to do. So Margaret did what she had to do. She took care of her kid. She took the little girl by the hand, walked her across the parking lot, got her into her car. And even with people yelling jeers and racial slurs at her, she drove Patricia home. And so, and she actually Margaret Kate actually made the cover of, I think it was Life magazine, back in 1957. It was, but she was sort of, my hero in all of this to begin with. And then as I started delving into it, with Marianne, one of the neat things was all during the writing process and the research, and we spent hours and hours in the National Public Library. But, I was learning new things about, my wife, who I've been married to for 40 odd years. It's okay, honey, how come this, and what about that? And she told me this one story, and I said, okay, how is it that I never knew this? But so there were a lot of really neat things about it, but there was a lot of heart-wrenching aspects to the story.
Well, that's one of the things I was going to mention. It definitely seems like it was a labor of love for you, and you're very passionate about it. And I'm just curious, the journey that you and your wife have taken to put this and bring it to realization. Is it, was this something that you started drafting like 40 plus years ago, or did it come later on in your writing career?
No, yeah, I knew I wanted to. This is probably the first book that I knew I wanted to write. Even before I even had any idea I'd ever write anything. I can remember when Marianne told me the story, I thought, wow, man, there's a book there, and I want to write it. And I'm thinking, I'm not even sure I was an English teacher yet at the time. But at any rate, no, it was not the first thing I wrote. I remember reading a line in one of James Baldwin's books that in his book, Go Tell It on the Mountain, when he was writing about that process. And he said, Mountain was the book I had to write if I was ever going to write anything else. And because it was sort of autobiographical in some ways. And, the first book that I wrote, called Adam, it was a book I had to write if I was ever going to write anything else, because that was near and dear to my heart. And in the immediate, it was one of my students who had been killed in an automobile accident the September after he graduated. It was just a kid that I had been really close to. And there's a whole group of them. They had elected me guest speaker at their graduation that year. And it was devastating to me. And it was a defining moment in my career as a teacher. So I needed to write that, and I did write that, and I'm glad. And then I was writing a column for Foster's, our local newspaper at the time, for about 9 years. And so my second book was a collection of about half of those. So then I finally got down to writing Hattie Cotton School, but I started with a draft. In fact, was part of my staff development. I had done some research, and I did a very detailed outline. And then Marianne and I spent parts of 2 summers We go to Nashville every year to visit her family, and we spent a significant part of 2 summers in the National Public Library just researching and photocopying and researching and photocopying, and boatloads of stuff. And we found some really cool stuff. We found notes that kids had written to Miss Kate, thanking her for saving their school in a way. We found notes that parents had written to Kate. We found notes and letters from colleagues of hers around the country, purveyors that the school did business with, writing to her, talking, letting her know that their thoughts and prayers were with the Hattie Cotton community, and things from people in the neighborhood. It was just incredible. It was incredible. When the book was first launched, we actually launched it at today's Hattie Cotton School, which still exists. It's a different building, but it's the same location. It's on West Greenwood Avenue in East Nashville. And but a lot of the students, had never heard, any of this story. They knew that there was a plaque out front. And finally, there was a plaque out front. One of those historical metal things that sort of does a little bit of a bio on what had happened there. So Marion and I did we got a little display built and put books in it and a bio, and it hangs on the walls at Hattie Cotton School now, so that they will know it. But there was, a lot of the politicians of today had not heard. A lot of the school committee members of today had not, heard much about the story. So it was a really good launch, and it's we've done some signings that were really sort of heartwarming. Because it really was a labor of love. It was brought back a lot of memories for Marianne, and it brought out a lot of pride of me for her, and what she had gone through. I went through some things in my career as a teacher, but nothing like this.
Well, I am really grateful to you sharing this story with us. And if you're just joining in, we're talking with Stephen MacKenziey. He is a featured member of our Author Holiday Showcase. And to learn more about that, you can head over to our website. You'll see that on the ticker at the bottom of your screen, nhwritersproject.org, where you'll see a collection of over 55 books from our member authors, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, youth, just highlighted for the season to let you know that there are some great gifts out there and ways that you can support our literary community. And Stephen is another one here who's written a very passionate story, and one that just did not have a lot of light shined on it. And obviously you're doing that, which is amazing. And when did this book actually, when was it published, Stephen?
We launched in May of 2024. Okay,
so recently. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Fantastic. Wow.
It was published by Premium Press America. They're out of Nashville. It was a lot of fun. We did a lot of publicity in the Nashville area at the time, and we've gone back once or twice and done some speaking, a couple of speaking engagements, and what we keep hearing is that, and some of my friends here in the Dover area have said, it grips me. I sat down, I started to read, and I thought, well, I'll read a couple of chapters, and I found myself, I read the whole book. It's a fairly easy read, but it's a gripping read. I think, at least that's what I'm hearing from folks.
Well, based on what you've told me, I would say I'd have to agree. So if you want to learn more about Stephen and this book of resilience, head on over to stephenmackenzieauthor.wordpress.com. You can also find it on Amazon, and you can also find it in our holiday showcase. All of those will link for you if you are passionate about purchasing this book for someone in your family who would love to read a story of resilience. It's truly amazing. I'm really grateful to you spending time with us today, Stephen, introducing us to your wife, who does play a very important role in this story as well. And if you want to support our literary community, I recommend you head on over to our website, support the Holiday Showcase like Stephen MacKenziey and all the other author members that we have. Thank you, Stephen, for joining me today. I really appreciate your time and your passion, and I hope you have a nice holiday.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Take care.